You all for joining the Product Leader Summit Virtual Speaker Series. My name is Nishith. I'm a product leader here from the Chicagoland. Um, I've been really deeply involved in this over the past few months and a year, along with a few other folks like Tomi here, who's been helping lead this talk. And what we've really been trying to do is foster a community for product leaders to bring their voice out to other product leaders. And this has really stemmed from the Product Leader Summit itself. The summit happens in the fall of every year, but it's only a couple days. So this was a natural extension of that for us to think about how can we bring topics and relevance and connection to product leaders for the remainder of the year when the summit is not happening. And it's led to some amazing talks over the past couple quarters as we've learn more and more about what product leaders care about. And that's what's led other product leaders to raise their hand and say, I have a topic I'd like to talk about. And if you've got one in the audience and you want to bring something to other product leaders, please reach out to Tomi or I. We can help facilitate that process. But today really is about facilitating a deeper connection and learning amongst product leaders. And the topic at hand for the month of May has really been about helping folks who are actively in the transition, or maybe not in the transition, but still making sure that they understand how to approach the job market, the transition, as well as how they put themselves out publicly. So last week, Tomi and a few other product leaders actually led an amazing talk about how to prepare for interviews, how to have a unique approach of how to actually present yourself and find the appropriate roles. And to follow up on that, we have Elena here who's going to really talk about how to make your LinkedIn stand out and be in a position where you can truly represent yourself authentically into the market for your skill sets. So with that said, Elena, I'll let you kind of take over from here.
Let me share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Great. Okay. By way of introduction, last year I just wrapped up a 25+ year career in tech, into which I feel I squeezed in 50 years worth of work. My last full-time job was a VP of data science at Meta, where I led a 1,500 person plus team of data scientists and data engineers. And on top of that, I had a bonus job where I led recruiting for data science and data engineering for all of Meta globally. So as a result, in my 25+ year career, I've directly hired and managed hundreds of people and indirectly thousands of people. And the advice that I'm going to give you is very much from the perspective of a now former hiring manager. And what I found, useful and appealing about people's LinkedIn profiles. I'm now living my best life and enjoying a portfolio career as the founder of a community called Women of Wisdom, an investor, startup advisor, and Zumba instructor. I've been on LinkedIn since forever, so 2004, and I'm connected to 29,688 people, getting close to the hard-coded limit that they have of 30,000 connections. And as you can imagine, I see a ton of profiles. And some are great, but others don't really do justice. When I know these people in real life and I know how awesome they are, their LinkedIn profiles just are not reflecting that awesomeness. So I'm here to help you do that. So let's start with the why. As you know, LinkedIn is lots of different things roll into one. It's your business card, your resume, your Rolodex. I know I'm dating myself just a tad. Your address book, your job board. It's a tool where you can message people directly. It's a tool where you create your personal brand, look for a job, connect with other folks professionally. It's a social media platform, a hiring tool, a business development tool, and probably lots more. But in today's talk, we're focusing on just the LinkedIn profile and particularly its role in creating your personal brand. And yes, its ability to help you find a job, either because you're actively looking or because you're at least passively open to new opportunities. Now, LinkedIn profile can be optimized for lots of different things. So it definitely helps to know what exactly are you trying to optimize your LinkedIn profile for. I know for many of you, you are actively searching for a job or at least open to new opportunities, even if you're not officially or actively searching. But you may also be launching a new business, or maybe you are a founder of a startup and you want more customers or money or partners. Maybe you have your own business and you need more customers for that. Maybe you've written a book or given a talk and you want to be hired as a speaker. There could be lots of different things, and your strategy with your LinkedIn profile will vary depending on what goals you have. So if you begin with the end in mind and ask yourself a question, how do you want to brand yourself? What is that perception that you want to create in the market? So you can think of your LinkedIn profile as a product marketing exercise where the product is you. And it's a chance for you to control the narrative and to shape perception about who you are. It is not just a chronological retelling of every job you've ever had and every breath you ever took. And it's not supposed to really focus on the past. Instead, it helps you craft the future that you want to have. So I'm going to try to make this as tangible and tactical and helpful as possible. And hopefully, as we go through it, you'll be interested in making some profile changes, literally, as we go through. And therefore, my recommendation is don't wait to have the perfect words in order to make profile changes. Make small tinkering changes to start with. And then, over time, you can make more profound changes. But first, let's make sure that you do not notify your entire network about the profile changes that you make. And the way to do that is go into settings and then visibility. And then there's the tab for share job changes, education changes, and work anniversaries. So turn that to off. And then share key profile updates in the same visibility section of LinkedIn should also be set to off. Obviously, when you want to blast to your network that you started a new job or you are launching a new business or whatever, then you turn those things on. But otherwise, I would encourage you to approach this as small incremental improvements that you make constantly, and something that you revisit early and often. So with that said, I'll give you a minute to make the profile changes on the visibility front, and then we'll go through some best practices and some do's and don'ts on the key elements of your LinkedIn profile. All right, let's start with the name. So I am often surprised when I come across people who hide their last name. It literally just shows the last initial. I don't know why LinkedIn even makes that possible, but I would recommend that this is not a place to go incognito. So make your last name visible to everyone. I'll show you where you would do that. If you have a maiden name and a married name, or you have a nickname, you show the other name in parentheses so that people can easily recognize you. I personally don't love it when people include acronyms, especially many acronyms, after their name in the name field itself. At most, include a one and make sure that it's a very commonly used one. I'm also not a fan of including emojis after your name unless you have a darn good reason to do so. So let me show you again where the last name visibility hides. It's in the settings visibility, and it does give you the option of hiding the last name, but I would recommend showing your last name to others. So again, in some very specific instances, maybe you'd want to hide your last name, but by default, I would recommend keeping it visible. All right, your headshot, so the photo of you. So first of all, again, do have a photo, not a good place to go incognito. I'm always shocked when I see that blank, gray, thing without your actual photo. Ideally, you'd want to have a professional headshot, but at the very least, make sure it's well lit, well composed, a recent picture of you, and only you. So don't put your dog. Don't put your spouse or a million friends, the Himalayas, or whatever else, right? Just make sure it's really a headshot and it looks as as quote unquote professional and as nice as it can be. Smile a Duchenne smile. That's the genuine smile where kind of the, around your eyes, like there's a little crinkle, and that's kind of the standard in America. I'll tell you a quick story. I came here to the US 35 years ago from Russia. And in Russia, we smile with our mouth sort of closed and teeth not showing. And so they kept telling me, now smile. I'm like, I'm smiling. What are you talking about? Again, here in America, it's more common to smile and kind of show your teeth. So, but Duchenne smile as in genuine smile is an important one. I would recommend not using cartoons or avatars unless you draw cartoons for a living or you run an avatar company and it's super relevant to your branding. If you do use a headshot tool that is AI powered, just be careful with it. Some of them are getting pretty good, but when I tried to do an AI headshot, from candid photos, there was like comical things like a necklace that starts and then disappears halfway, or earring in one ear and not the other, and my ears are not even pierced, so it can get pretty comical sometimes. My other recommendation, and again, I'm not speaking for LinkedIn and I don't have insider knowledge, but again, as a former hiring manager, I would recommend not adding a public open to work banner, the one that then shows around your photo, and instead use the confidential, the hidden settings to alert recruiters that you are in fact open to work. But again, doesn't display it super prominently in the headshot. I do recommend also following target companies on LinkedIn, and recruiters do use that for sure as a signal that you are in fact interested in and open to work. And for the banner image, I recommend using a custom image rather than the default, using the space to promote your website, your book, your role as a speaker. Another option is to have an image that is relevant to either your work or job function, or to showcase your location. So if you're based in San Francisco, Golden Gate Bridge is often featured in people's banner images. Before I start showing you some examples of top profiles, I know that there was a question on credentials. So go ahead and ask your question, and I will address it.
Yeah, Amber, if you're around.
Hello. Yeah, thanks for the question, for answering the question. Curious the reason why not to add a credential at the end of the name. Is it just a preference for the way it looks, or is there another reason? So like an MBA, you work hard for that, so why not display it?
So I was talking about literally the name field, like Elena Krasnoperova, PhD. Now,
Right.
there are some people who do display, something that is really important to them, the credential, like an MD or a PhD or an MBA. And there was a period of time when I did include, a PhD in my, after my name. What I was reacting to in particular is I've literally seen names that have, I kid you not, like 7 acronyms after them. And I've been in the industry for a long time, and I didn't know most of these acronyms. I'm like, pretty sure you shouldn't include this many. So the one tip that I have for all of you is, as you are searching, let's say you're looking for your ideal job, right? Look for people with that kind of a job, right? And see how they're positioning themselves and what do they do. So again, if you do use an acronym, if it's important to you, then just make sure it's just one. Don't go 7 acronyms. Certainly in the name, and possibly even in the headline would be my recommendation. But again, it's not an official recommendation, just my intuition. All right, let's go to the headline, which is that phrase, that appears right below your name. It is the most important part of the algorithm. So it's weighted the most heavily. And therefore, from a keyword perspective, that's what the algorithm really, keys off of. And it's also the first thing that humans see. It's the thing that appears above the fold. So you really want to make it count. Now, particularly if you're looking for a job, or if you're at least passively open to new opportunities, you want to make sure that you include the relevant keywords, right? Because obviously, for algorithm, it matters. If you have your own business, one very good format for the headline is in the format, I help customer type X solve problem Y, I help early stage startup find product market fit, or some such thing. If you work full-time, LinkedIn defaults your headline to be just your current job title. And my recommendation is don't limit it just your current job title. You can do those, what are they called? The vertical lines, separating the different parts of the headline, and you can mention a few other things, in there. So just because it's the default, you don't have to go with that. If you have a portfolio career like I do at this point, and you are doing a bunch of different things, just list the things that you want to highlight and put the most important things first. And I recommend including credibility markers in your headline. That's where acronyms like again the credentials that you have, right? The impressive ones, the MD, PhD, MBA, etc. Goes in there. If you worked at really big brand companies, Meta, Google, whatever, put that in there. If you were an early employee at a company that had a really big successful exit, you put that in there. Just think about, again, what is the most impressive thing about you that other people would find appealing, and put that in. And again, I'm not a huge fan of cliches or buzzwords or emojis or too many acronyms. Again, one acronym perfectly fine, just not too many. So let me show you some examples of profiles, and some of them may look familiar to you. And I see that there's a question on positioning if you're looking for multiple roles. Hopefully the multiple roles are not so multiple that they're kind of all over the place, hopefully they're related, in which case you put the roles that you are looking for. So I see examples of people putting in CPO, VP of product management, right? Maybe they've done both of those things in the past, and they're open to either of those roles. Sometimes I've seen things like program management and project management, right? And both are included. And from a sequencing perspective, you put them kind of in the order of priority for you and what you prefer. You can also run little experiments, and you can try optimizing your profile for one particular thing, right? As you are pursuing one set of roles, and then you can change it, because remember, you can change your profile as many times as you want. And experiment and see what works for you. So here's an example of a profile. Ha, many of you know Ha, but she has a lovely headshot. She shows a community that she is leading. I'm not sure which one, because she's a community builder of so many different groups. And then because she lives a portfolio life and portfolio career, she lists the different things that she does, and encourages people to visit the website for her advisory and consulting firm. Sandy, here's a good example of a CPO/VP of product, because she's done both in the past and is open to both of these roles, presumably. Advisor, coach, and her, X is Amazon AI and GoodRx. And her call to action is book an appointment with her on intro.co. Dan Olson, whom you may also know, he wrote a book, and so he uses a picture of his book in the banner, and describes himself as a product management trainer, author, and speaker, helping leaders build great products and strong product teams. So this is your classic, I help people of this type do whatever. And he has a website for his consulting business. Gabriel is a product coach, and she very much has the I coach product leaders and founders on building products customers love and driving real business results. And she has a great website. One thing that I find super impressive about her is that she is quite young. I think she only graduated from college like 10 years ago, but she has a super, super impressive and very optimized LinkedIn profile. This is a friend of mine, Peter, who is a CEO of a company called Bold Commerce. And he had very senior roles at Intuit, PayPal, and First Data, and he lists those. And this is a good example. If you're a founder or if you're a CEO of a company, then putting that as your main thing and putting, in his case, Bold Commerce, that's their logo and tagline, right? In the banner, makes a lot of sense, and I see that a lot with founders. So let's take a minute, and if you're inspired, if you heard anything new or interesting, go ahead and make one small change to your LinkedIn profile. And in the meanwhile, if you have any questions, you can raise a hand, a Zoom hand, or you can put it in chat.
We've got two in the chat that I've kind of queued up. Sorry, I don't have your name, just initials, MP. If you want to come off mute, otherwise I can read your question off. Okay, I'll just go ahead and read off. So it says, how would you position if you are targeting multiple types of roles? For example, program management, process excellence of post-merger integration.
So these are, you would put all of them, right? And so program management or program manager, right, is the job title, if you will, right? But yes, those things can be done with those vertical dividers, and you just list them in your headline. So your headline is limited to a certain number of characters. I forgot how many characters that is, but I would, potentially use all of those, character spaces. I don't think it will hurt. And just list those things. Now, the thing that I would encourage you to be careful about is, when it's kind of all over the place, if it's like really unconnected and unrelated things, like the three examples that you gave, they sound related and they plausibly belong in one headline. So yeah, I would put them. Just think of it from the perspective, again, especially if it's in the context of looking for a job, right? Look at the job descriptions for your ideal jobs. Look for what is mentioned there, and then you put those relevant phrases and keywords in there, awesome, so that you're found by both humans and algorithms.
Awesome. Cool. Next question was from Parul. If you want to ask.
Yeah, thank you. It was more around, is there a strategy or approach you recommend in terms of keywords and how you highlight them in a way that it comes across to the relevant job searches, but at the same time doesn't seem forced, like you're stuffing in keywords just to be surfacing up?
Yeah. Yeah, so the keyword stuff, right? Like I said, if you look at job profiles, job descriptions, for the jobs that you want, it's pretty obvious, right? What the keywords and phrases are. I would avoid the obvious keyword spamming, right? Like when it's literally close synonyms or even grammatical variations of the same thing. Like don't be obviously keyword spammy. The other thing that to me comes across as keyword spammy is when people list the skills and they go like and list 50 different skills. I would probably do maximum of 5, for each area that allows it, and you can vary the skills that you pick in the different places, and this allows you to get multiple keywords across without any section looking overly keyword spammy kind of
Got
thing.
it. But would you pick the there's a top skills section in the LinkedIn profile? Is that where you would most likely go there and add those skills, or would it be just throughout the profile, your insight is more across the board.
Yeah. So basically, again, my understanding, I'm not an insider, right, of LinkedIn, but my understanding is headline is the most important thing, right, and gets the most weight in that. So do make sure it is keyword optimized, right? About is the next most important thing, which is the text, right, that you put in there. And yes, all of the areas, all the places in which you can list skills, I would recommend doing that. But somewhere, the 2 to 5, skills, in each place, not more than that.
Got it. Thank you.
All right.
Elena, we've got a couple more questions around the topic if you want to take them now or put
Yeah,
them
go ahead.
later. So Agatha is, if you want to go ahead and ask.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Elena. Glad to be here. I noticed that some people use the carousel images for their LinkedIn banner. What are your thoughts on that? Does it make sense to have multiple images instead of just one?
Yeah, I saw it recently as well. I don't know. I'm not sure it matters. I mean, from an algorithmic perspective, I'm pretty sure it does not. And in general, the banner image is less for algorithms and more for humans. If you have multiple things that you're really eager to show, you can certainly experiment with that. I think if you select one really good, compelling banner image, I think one is good. I don't have strong opinions one way or the other.
Awesome. Elena, we've got one more from Jacqueline.
All right.
I'll go ahead and read it out loud. So in terms of headline, should you put down where you are at, for example, VP GM, or where you want to go, such as CPO, particularly because titles depend also on company size and you don't want to be excluded from opportunities?
Yeah. So if you if you're open to both, right? Like the classic example is CPO and VP, right? You list them both. And so you are truthful. We're going to go through that when we get to the experiences section, right? You truthfully say, what your job title was. Like you're not claiming that you were ever a CPO, right? But you can still put it in your headline. It's kind of your aspirational, job, if you will, right? As CPO / VP of product.
Got it.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Let's go through about. So it's the second most important part of the algorithm. And so therefore keywords are super important. Again, particularly if you're looking for a job. One pet peeve of mine that I have, because like I said, I see a lot of LinkedIn profiles, is I see some people do the about section in third person. And I would not recommend you do that. The LinkedIn recommends, and most people write about themselves in first person. This is not a resume. This is not a board bio. And it just sounds awkward when you talk about yourself in a third person on LinkedIn profile. It is supposed to be professional. It is a professional at work after all. And oftentimes, you're looking for a job actively or passively, but definitely make it more conversational and personal than a resume or a bio. And kind of use your own sort of, use your personality and let it shine through. Oftentimes people conclude with some personal interest and things like that at the end. As with everything, put the most important things in the first 2 lines. The rest is below the fold. Humans don't even bother clicking on the more, right, to see the full thing. So just make sure you get your most important things first. And in the about section, you're answering the question, what is unique about you, or what's unique about your value proposition? So here's some examples. This is Ha, and she starts with literally, hi, I'm Ha. I'm the founder and managing partner of Next Step. We support early stage founders, blah, blah, blah. Right? She goes on to describe some of her journey, and she concludes with a statement about personal interests. My passion outside of work include poker, football, cooking, throwing dinner party, traveling, building relationships through networking and paying it forward, and spending time with my husband and 3 boys. And for those of you who know her in real life, you know how authentic that statement is, right? Like this is her through and through. About sections don't need to be long. So Dan Olson is quite brief. My passion is building great products. I'm a hands-on trainer and consultant that helps companies build and optimize their products and product teams. But for what it's worth, and especially if you're looking for a job, because this is a space where you can say what you want to say, right? You can do the long version. I personally would recommend going a bit longer. This is Gabriel's about statement that I showed you before, and she must be a young millennial or maybe even an older Gen Z, because she doesn't capitalize sentences. So she literally starts with what great looks like in product, and it's throughout her profile, and it's definitely her. And she too concludes with I'm originally from Brazil, I speak 4 languages, I love to cook and travel, and I currently live in New York City. And so this is just a reminder of you do you, right? Now, you're optimizing it for both keywords, and so machines and algorithms, but also for humans, right? And it needs to be written naturally, and this is back to the whole, it shouldn't be keyword spammy, although you can feel free to include your top X, skills, I would say no more than 5, at the end of your about section. There is a place for that on LinkedIn. All right, before we go into the next sections, any questions about the about section? They sound very meta. Any about questions about?
Nothing in the chat so far, but if anyone wants to come off mute.
All right, let's talk about experiences, also known as your past jobs, right? So I don't recommend that you just copy and paste your entire resume, although it's perfectly fine as a starting point, right? So if you are either creating your LinkedIn profile or refreshing it, it's fine to kind of first do a resume dump, if you will, and then just edit from there. Here's a very important tip. If you're currently between jobs and you do not have a full-time job, list at least one position where you can legitimately say that it started, some time ago, whatever, months ago or years ago, whatever, and it's to present. Because it doesn't have to be a full-time job. It could be, you could be self-employed, it could be a contract position, it could be part-time, it could be volunteer, advisor, mentor, whatever, right? So, but I highly, highly recommend having something that you're listed as doing right now, as opposed to just, everything ending and then you have to explain, etc. So that's just a recommendation. As you're writing your past jobs, focus on what you accomplished and the impact that you had, with numbers where possible. Obviously, don't disclose confidential information such as revenue numbers for a private company. But that's where the percentages, are often useful. So I achieved X% savings or Y% growth or, whatever. So, but yeah, to the extent that you can quantify the impact that you had, that's a good thing. If you're listing multiple jobs at the same company, ensure that they're grouped. I'm going to show you in a minute how to do that. As you're recounting your history, use the most impressive, but obviously truthful titles. So don't make up a title that you didn't have. But if you were a VP, spell it out, right? If you were a director or a group product manager, list it, that way. In companies like Meta, where I was, my last job for 4.5 years, they were like, oh, titles don't matter. Yes, they matter. Of course they matter. And they had 2 levels of director and senior director. And within Meta, they didn't distinguish it. So literally everybody was a director, regardless of whether they were D1 or D2. For LinkedIn purposes, I would absolutely say senior director if that was your job title. Now, if you're looking for a job and if you are like, I'm 54, and so on the wrong side of 50, as the joke goes, but just be aware that ageism is a thing, and you might want to either omit or at least shorten the jobs that you held last millennium, as my children remind me, especially if they're not terribly relevant to what you're doing right now. Now, interestingly, if you run your own business, especially if you're a consultant or advisor or a board member, having a lot of experiences is a good thing, and so you don't need to sort of hide it or downplay it there, but just be aware. Now, it's your choice. I'm not forcing you or recommending even that you absolutely do this or do that. Just be aware that unfortunately age bias is a thing, and so just make these choices intentionally. So a few more pieces of advice on the experiences. If the company that you worked for is not known, it's not a household name, briefly explain what it does before getting into your responsibilities. When relevant, include a link to the website or a product launch announcement if you're responsible for a product, or you can attach various media files like images or video, etc. And it just makes it look more comprehensive. Probably less so for the machines and algorithms, but for the humans that are looking at it, it can give them a better feel for what you accomplished. I would include the top skills demonstrated in the job. Again, wherever LinkedIn allows you to add top skills, might as well do it. My recommendation is to limit it to no more than 5. Please do run a spell check. It's shocking how many typos I see in people's LinkedIn profiles. While I recommend caution for many of the uses of the AI tools, they can be very helpful in suggestions for how to optimize how you phrase and describe your past roles. So you can literally say, here's the job description for my ideal job. Here's my resume, right? What should I highlight? And obviously don't take it, blindly and consider these suggestions, but it can be very helpful. So again, I'm going to show you some examples and then we'll take your questions because it sounds like there are some questions. So again, this is Ha's example, and she describes in her current job the next step advisory and consulting firm that she runs and what they do. Sandy is, her last full-time job was vice president of product at GoodRx, which is a public company, which she mentions here. But she wrapped up that job in December of last year. And now she's an advisor at a company, and she's also an intro, and you can book session with her there. And, that is showing up as her, her current roles. I'm not sure I can go back, but this was the previous page was where you could see examples of media that you can attach. This is how to make it look nice when you have been working in the same company for a long time. And the way you do it is when you create the experience section, you create a separate entity for each job title that you held at the company. But as long as you use the exact same company name spelled identically, and that it is linked to the company page from LinkedIn's dropdown, then it will automatically show it as belonging to the same company, and it very nicely shows that, for instance, you got promoted from manager to director to VP, or you had multiple roles, etc. So it will all be done automatically as long as you are picking exactly the same company and making sure you're selecting that LinkedIn drop down. So here's an example from Gabrielle's, where she was at Pivotal Labs and she held a couple of different roles, and so those are shown together. But the other reason that I want to show you this piece is she does a very nice job with focusing on the impact that she had, including some numbers where possible, and explaining her responsibilities in very compelling language. All right, so again, I'm going to give folks another opportunity to make another small change if there was anything again that sparked your interest. And meanwhile, let's take a couple of questions.
Sure. I think first one I saw was from Gabe. Gabe, if you want to ask live.
Sounds good. Is it better to basically list out your different positions at a company, like director of product, VP of product, etc., as you're climbing the ranks? Or is it better to use your most senior role? Or is there kind of like you want to use them in certain situations, depending on, how long you've been there, etc.? I'm just curious if there's like best practices on when to use which approach.
So So I'm gonna stop sharing for a second just so that I can go back, because somehow the it doesn't let me find that slide and I will pull it up. Hang on. Okay, here we go. Okay, I guess I need to share first before I go. Here you go. Here you don't go, apparently. Okay, here we are. So this was the example that I accidentally skipped over. So this is Peter's, role, where at PayPal, he was for 3.5 years, right? And he had 2 roles, same level, vice president, right? But one of them was vice president and general manager. One of them was, a VP role. And, they were sufficiently different, right? That he listed them separately. But again, as long as you do what I just talked about, which is he selected PayPal, right, for both roles, but see how each of them has a specific title. There's like a little description there. There's the dates, and so in this case, it just shows that he went from being a VP in one area and then to being a VP and GM, right, in a different area. The Intuit example, where he was much longer, right, 10.5 years, he started as a director and he got promoted to president and division general manager, which is a pretty big deal, right? And he was a CMO and CPMO. So I would say that if you're showing, the progression, it makes sense. And this way, they see both, right? The most recent and the most senior title, as well as the previous titles. So if I think this is a very compelling way to show the career progression and the promotional track record. So that's what I would recommend, generally, as opposed to just listing it and then saying promoted from. Especially the other reason that I would recommend it, like in his case, an example, he did director of marketing, then he was a general manager, he was, and he was in different parts of Intuit, right? For different things. And so you can imagine, like, all of these are keywords, right? And so depending on what people are looking for, again, that's another benefit potentially of listing the multiple roles. Other
Awesome.
questions about the experience?
We've got one from Justin, if you want to come on.
Sure, thank you. So you mentioned the age bias and kind of truncating your history to avoid showing the longer breadth. And I'm wondering, if you do that, if you do eliminate some older jobs, should you also avoid saying things like, I've been in product management for 20 years, or having dates on graduation from school and things like that?
Yeah. So let's start with the easiest. On the dates of graduation from school, yes, I would recommend not listing the years because it's a completely optional field. So no reason to list it. If you went to Stanford GSB, it doesn't matter if you graduated, last year or 25 years ago or 30 years ago, whatever. So schools, I would definitely recommend dropping the thing. So as far as and a lot of people with a lot of experience start with, I have 20 years of experience, right? And so my advice is, do it intentionally. Just be aware, right, that it is a thing. The age bias, is a thing. And but if you're looking for a very senior role and your positioning is like, I've been around the block, not just once, not just twice, but like, a lot of times, then lean into that. And I don't mean like completely like not list the jobs at all, right? But like I am not exaggerating. I saw somebody, with very senior roles, in tech, etc., listing a job that they had in college when they worked like at McDonald's or something. Like, why? So I would not drop jobs, even though we're a long time ago, that are at least relevant, right, and sort of in the industry and things like that. I was just talking about like this super long time ago and really not relevant.
Okay.
Then again, as far as deciding the years of experience, like make it an explicit choice. If you think it will help you to sort of play it up, you can do that. Otherwise not. It speaks for yourself, right? Like they can tell how much experience you have.
And they'll tell when they meet you in person too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Elena, I want to just give you a time check where we've got about like 10 minutes left or so. So I don't know if there's more you want to cover and less questions,
So there are
but
just literally two more elements. So for education, you list the schools that you attended and making sure that each one links to the official school page. You list your degree and honors. Other info is optional, but you can highlight what's particularly relevant or impressive. Consider listing 2 to 5 skills that you acquired there, and consider omitting the year, again, in the spirit of being aware of age bias. And your school's alumni community can be an extremely powerful tool for job search and referrals. So this is an example from a friend of mine, Patricia Bothwell, who may be on this call or maybe not, but I love, in general, her LinkedIn profile, but particularly her education section, where she went to Stanford GSB and she lists that, but she also talks about the fact that she founded a consumer robotics venture there. And she lists a few key skills, and then Harvard, her degree, and the honors, and again highlighting a couple of very specific things that are relevant there. And she also listed in the education section the CPO accelerator that she went to. Just a quick side note, as you know, referrals are a very effective way to be hired. They account for only 7% of applications, but 40% of hires. So obviously a disproportionate lift, right? And recruiters and employers really believe that referrals are their number one source of great candidates. So when you're asking for referrals, you start with people who really know you, and then you expand to people who know you less well, but that includes alums of the schools that you went to. I'm going to skip this. And so one very under-leveraged tool on LinkedIn is the alumni tool, where, for instance, you can go to the Stanford University Graduate School of Business, and there's this alumni tab right at the bottom. And if you select that, it shows you all of the alums of your school, and you can search it by title, keyword, company, etc. As you approach them, asking for referrals or connections. Again, it's a very powerful tool. And last part is just there other sections that I'll go through super quickly. There's volunteering, which is optional, but it's helpful to the degree that it either showcases your professional skills and or establishes common ground with potential employers or referrers, right? We are human, right? And we want to hire people that we know and like. And having something in common, even if it is a volunteering or nonprofit or interests or something else, right, that we have in common, is can definitely help with that likability aspect. Skills, I mentioned this, so I suggest doing top 5 skills. LinkedIn used to be super keyed in on skills from a keyword perspective. I think it's a bit less so, but I would still probably pick the top 5 skills and go there. Language is very optional, but can be fun, and again can help establish common ground. Interest, causes, same things. The one thing I highly recommend, pardon the pun, is the recommendations. So I would try getting at least 3, and one way to get recommendations is to ask for recommendations and potentially even draft a recommendation to make it easier for them, and they can of course edit or use or not use as they see fit, but just make it super easy. And then for further reading, there's this book that I highly recommend called Linked, and it's written by 2 LinkedIn insiders who used to work there. And then there is another lovely free ebook called The Complete LinkedIn Playbook from HubSpot that you can sign up for. And feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn. I have a few spots left before I get maxed out, so take them while they last. So this is my first and last name, or you can email me, or both. And now we can go into the last section of the Q&A if anybody has any questions.
Sure. I saw some folks that had questions out in the audience since then. Jacqueline, if you're on.
Yep. Hi. My question was around putting down titles. So I've seen people put down titles that match their scope, but not their true level internally within the company. I've also seen people be very creative, suggestive of titles that are just completely not reflective of their level. And I think they do this because it does get them the recruiter outreach and interest. What do you think about that?
I do not think titles is where you get creative, because you would lose credibility and potentially a job offer if you effectively lied on your LinkedIn profile. So if you're not a vice president, do not say that you were a vice president, right? Like that's just not a good look. One thing that I've seen a lot is head of something, right, as the title. So here's my observations about that. So there are many startups that don't grant director or VP titles. Literally the most senior title, for a functional area is head of. And if that was your job, say so, right? In bigger companies, what I've seen, like Google and Meta or whatever, when people use head of, it is often the level right below director. So the IC7 or the M2 role. And if it's truthful, you're responsible for a particular area, and you can refer to yourself as that. But just know that the recruiters in particular and hiring managers have a bit of a decoder ring, right, for companies. Also, companies tend to have, especially the big companies, right? They have pretty strict lateral kind of hiring rules. So as an example, if you were at Google before and now you want to get Meta or vice versa or whatever, chances are you'll be brought at exactly the same level, right? As before. So this is a long-winded way of saying don't lie, right? So say the most impressive things, but also the most true, the most impressive true thing about what you did.
Cool. Thank
And
you.
if you're trying to impress them with the scope of your responsibilities, say it in the description, what you were responsible for, but don't make up a job title that you never had.
Awesome. Looks like Heidi, you had a question out there too, if you want to come off.
Mine might be a little unique to me, not sure how relevant it is to everyone else. Took a big career pivot that in many ways was sort of defining, for me, after where I went and opened restaurants and became a chef, whole different life. And then came back into tech, VP product, been doing that for the last 10 years. But it's, the perception of it, like my story around it makes sense, where I've really specialized in like small business products since then, because, helping people like that survive, like really thrive. But I kind of don't know how it looks to people that don't actually know me and know the story. I worry that it comes off as just like this lady makes these random pivots and we don't know what she's going to do next,
Yeah. So I think the best place to tell that story is in the about section, right?
Okay.
That's literally your story. And you can explain, how it came about and why you pivoted and how having been a restaurant owner makes you the best product manager or product leader, right? Or a better one, that you can be. So I think that's a great place to tell that story. And even in the job description itself, right? When you're explaining what you did, right? You can highlight things like, what you learned, right? Or how it applies, again, this is your chance to tell your story. This is, so, but about section is great. And then the job description, right? That you're talking about for your interesting sort of pre-pivot,
The virgin. Yeah.
career.
Thank you.
Awesome.
But personally, as a hiring manager, I love people with rich, diverse, interesting experiences. So I think it's a plus, not a minus.
It also actually plays into what you can talk about with the interviewers. They will ask about those things.
Yeah, yeah. When so I didn't seek out the job at Meta, they found me. But when I came into an interview with one of them and I looked him up, etc. And I come in and he looked me up too, and he goes, "Did you create Simply Circle?" And I was because I was a founder before I came to Meta. And I said, "Well, yes, I did." And so it turned out his kid's school used my product that I created. And it was like, oh my God, like, so to your point, this is a great way to establish, again, that common ground and have a really interesting conversation. And this goes back to the, humans hire humans, right? They want to feel like they know you and like you. And, having, broad interests and an interesting life is again, definitely a plus.